Welcome back in, everybody, to a Wednesday edition of Birds 365 here on JAKIB Sports. Joined now by Brandon Lee Gouton of Bleeding Green Nation, one of the best Eagles websites out there. Make sure you guys go check out Bleeding Green Nation. BLG, how you doing, man? Good. Welcome to the show.
Doing good, guys. How's it going?
Good, BLG. Happy Thanksgiving Eve, number one. And now I asked Mike Gill this. I'm going to ask you because you have some length. Did the Eagles contact you for an edge rusher tryouts?
They know I'm retired. Yeah, they can't afford. I don't think they can afford me.
They are taking some dart throws, and it started a couple of weeks ago, really, when they brought back Lamar Jackson and O'Shawn Mathis. Now it's KJ Henry on the practice squad. Charles Harris off waivers. Malik Reed, they worked out. We'll see if they bring him in. Which one of those dart throws are going to hit, or are we talking about missing the board completely, BLG?
Yeah, it seems to me like they're kind of just throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall to see maybe what sticks here, which I think is a pretty reasonable approach given the fact that we're in late November. There aren't amazing edge rusher options out there. The trade deadline's obviously over. So I think these are all reasonable kind of take a flyer on this guy, see what he's got kind of chances. None of them are, I think, super compelling. But and also, look, I think some of it is maybe they have hope Bryce Huff can come back at some point, and they're trying to bide their time a little bit here. Obviously, can't just count on that as a sure thing because I mean, even if he does get back, he wasn't lighting the world on fire
No,
before the
yeah.
injury, so that's an issue.
Yeah, no doubt. Losing Brandon Graham is definitely big for this team. John brings up the quote all the time of it's not about one injury; it's multiple injuries at the same position. So we'll see if the Eagles can handle that. BLG, what's your general feeling though on this team now at 9-2? I mean, they just keep out physicaling teams, and sometimes when I think about football, it's if you can out physical anybody you line up against, you have a good chance to beat that opponent. I think they're in a good spot right now with the way they've been dominating in the run game. What's your general feeling on this 9-2 team and their chances at making a Super Bowl run this year?
Yeah, if we want to talk about identity, like being physical, that toughness is certainly in there, and that goes for the offensive line. Opening holes for Saquon Barkley, just tossing defenders around. Goes for Saquon Barkley himself. Obviously, he's had just some straight up like nasty stiff arms that we've
Yeah, that
seen,
was a hell of a stiff arm, I
and,
guess.
and he's
Yeah.
done that like regularly. He
Yeah.
just like sticks that arm out and is just like deleting people and shoving them to the ground. But it's not even just them. Look at AJ Brown too, who had 48 yards of after yards after the catch in this game against the Rams. Rams just like could tackle him. We already know he's a beast with the ball in his hands. So it just really kind of goes all the way around where they've been physical, they've been tough, and they've really built an identity on that.
I always talk about margin of error, BLG, because I think that's the point of Jeffrey Lurie's whole philosophy about having a high octane passing offense. You want to, it's not that you can't win this way, but you want to increase your margin of error if things go badly on a particular game day. There's some teams, and I go back to the Jimmy Johnson Cowboys being the most notable in recent history. Doesn't matter. If you're that good, if you're that better, everybody knows what's coming and you can't stop it. Is it possible the Eagles are just that good in this type of football?
I think for the most part, yes. I tend to think there's going to be a game, and hey, maybe it's this week against the Baltimore
Yeah.
Ravens, who are allowing the fewest yards per carry in the NFL, but are certainly more vulnerable uh, against the pass. So maybe it's this week where you have that game where you're going to have more volume from Jalen Hurts than we've seen from the Eagles. I'm reluctant to bet against Saquon Barkley in this run game, given the way they're going. And I've seen the Eagles dominate some pretty good run defenses. I think back in previous years when the Saints had like the number one run defense in the NFL, and the Eagles didn't have Saquon Barkley back
Yeah,
then.
yeah.
They did have Jeff Stoutland and a really good offensive line, and
Right.
it didn't really matter who they were facing. So I do think the run game is so good that I have a hard time believing it's going to be totally shut down, even if they're playing, the NFL's best run defense. But to your point, like there's going to be a time where the passing game is just going to have to be more present than it's been.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Call me a glutton for punishment, BLG, but I'm going under 255 for Saquon. I'm going to bet against that, but
Sure.
hey, I'm a negative guy. Under 255.
BLG, go
yeah.
ahead, John.
No, you can't expect that every week. But to your point, I don't know. I keep waiting for it because there's so much talent on the Eagles offense. And I don't know. I mean, a lot of people clap back at me because I say I don't see the efficiency in the passing game that should be there. There's meat on the bone. It's gotten better over this streak, and they've certainly stopped turning it over, which is helpful. But you still see a couple plays, it seems, each and every game where, all right, if this ball comes out on time, you got a big play. And the advanced statistics pointed out the film, PFF's got them in the 20s. Everybody's got them in the 20s when it comes to passing efficiency. Am I crazy? Should they be doing better, even in the limited opportunities because of the running game, which in theory should make you better in the passing game?
I mean, I don't think it's crazy. I think, look at the Bengals game when Jalen Hurts was pretty electric. Aside from a little bit of a slow start in that one, I think people, were feeling pretty good about like the offense's outlook, about Jalen Hurts' outlook. Like when he plays really well like that, there's a different feel. And not to say he hasn't played well, but I just, as we're talking about with opportunity cost and meat left on the bone here, and once you face tougher teams, and again, this week probably a great example of this, that you're not going to always be able to get away with those things as much, and they're probably going to need him to do a little bit more. I will give him credit for, early in the season, kind of the big point with the turnovers, and they're obviously happening at way too high of a rate, was that like he didn't need to carry the offense himself. He is such a good supporting cast that if he could even kind of just scale back on being so careless with the ball, then they're probably going to be okay. And they figured that out, and they've done that. That's good. But again, it's about trying to like take that next step from there to really elevate this thing even further.
Yeah, and we'll see if they can do that. BLG, I'd feel remiss if I didn't ask you. You did witness a 300-plus yard game from Saquon Barkley. Have you ever seen in person a running back as good as Saquon Barkley? Maybe you have. I don't know. Maybe it's just more of this offensive line to you. But this guy's unbelievable to watch. What did you make of him and his historic performance on Sunday night?
Yeah, I mean, like that's the kind of the proper framing, right? Is like, is this the best Eagles season ever? And we're not there yet because Reggie White had what, like 21 sacks in a season, a strike shortened season at one point. But like that's the kind of, I think, conversation we should be discussing him in. Like he's been unreal, and he is the best. I just think because it's all there, it's everything. It's catching the ball, it's fighting hard for yards. He makes like 7 yard, 8 yard runs like look really impressive. And then in addition to that, you give him daylight, he's gone. Not every running back can do that. Like we've seen Eagles running
Absolutely.
backs who haven't been able to break it like that. So it's really just every single thing. There's really nothing he can't do.
And this is why this week is so fun because, I brought the numbers between Saquon and Derrick Henry are eerily similar. Saquon kind of took the lead this week coming off the 255 game, but, Derrick's averaging 6 yards a carry. He's got 13 touchdowns. He's got an 87 yard. It's amazing the way he can run at his size. Better tandem, Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, or Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley?
Yeah, it's tough. I'm going to go with the Ravens just because, I mean, Lamar has been amazing as a passer this year. I mean, leads the NFL in passer rating. Just he's been great, and obviously, I think he's a better. Everyone would say he's a better runner than Jalen Hurts.
He's a better runner than everybody,
That's
every quarterback that
it's not even a slight to Jalen Hurts. It's just
no.
He's insane.
Special.
Yeah.
So I think you have to add that and the importance of the position and the fact that I would take Saquon over Derrick Henry in a slight margin right now. But I think if we're talking about the aggregate of both quarterback and running back, I would give it to the Ravens.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you also have to add in I know Lamar's a great runner, and that's obvious. BLG, he's got over 3,000 passing yards already with 27 touchdown passes and 3 picks.
Mm.
I know why this guy is the leader in the MVP race every stinking year. He's that freaking good. It's pretty unbelievable to watch. But BLG, I think a big key in this game is going to be, obviously, when you think about Derrick Henry, is this a Jordan Davis game this week? Because he's got a limited role, and many have questioned whether that was worth the 13th overall draft pick. Okay, well, he's here to be the run stopper. You're going up against Derrick Henry this week. In my opinion, that means it's a Jordan Davis game. What say you?
Yeah, the last time the Eagles faced Derrick Henry, I think, was back in 2022 when he was on the Titans. And did a pretty good job of shutting him down, but it's obviously a much different dynamic here than it was in that game. And yeah, I think with even though Lamar is passing the ball so well, there's some games here where that volume is really down, just like that's how it's kind of been for Jalen Hurts, and he hasn't needed to fully carry the weight of the offense with his arm. So, and some of his, worst games have been when those pass attempts obviously have gone up. Some of that is just how it goes when you're trailing and whatnot. But I do think if the Eagles can kind of make, this Ravens offense a bit more pass heavy, then they stand more of a chance. Certainly if Derrick Henry is just doing his thing and running all over this defense. So yeah, I think Jordan Davis will be a big part of that.
The Ravens defense, like I look at the players and I'm like, oh, that's pretty stinking good, but they haven't been good on defense. I get kind of a similar thing in the opposite range. If you think about Baltimore and all their talent on defense, particularly in the secondary, and I think they're 31st in passing defense. And they went from, highly regarded Mike McDonald. They lost Anthony Weaver. They lost a whole bunch of coaches. Zach Orr, first time defensive coordinator, just, was a great player, forced to retire. Maybe a little bit of Sean Desai, too much too soon. Whereas the Eagles were bad, and then they get the veteran defensive mind. The Ravens had the veteran defensive mind. Then they got real bad with the young defensive mind. Is it as simple as that? Because they have talent on defense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sixth highest average passer rating allowed this season. Only 7 teams are allowing more yards per pass attempt, and only 1 team is allowing more yards or passing yards per game. So they're gettable through the air, the secondary.
And by the way, they have Kyle Hamilton and Marlon Humphrey and a bunch of good defense. Nate Wiggins, even as a rookie, I thought he was way too slight, but that guy can cover. I'm like, how are they so bad on the back end? It makes no sense to me.
Yeah, it's a fair question. Obviously they traded for Trey White, who's been
Yeah.
terrible. The Rams at the deadlines, they're self-aware about some of those weaknesses too, and trying to address things. But it just seems like they just, as simple as it is, like don't have the answers against the pass.
Yeah.
BLG, are you concerned about the passing game still? Because I was early in the year, and now I'm starting to look at this team, and I'm like, if the defense keeps every opponent at bay, and you don't let them get a 2-score lead. To this point, they've been so good that it's allowed the Eagles to get into third and fourth quarters and still be able to stick to the run.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not as concerned about the passing game because I think they have what they need on both sides of the ball to make it work. How concerned are you still about the passing game and where it is right now?
Yeah, I'm not concerned. Like, again, they're going to be a really good team. Like, that's not my worry as it relates to the passing game. My worry would be that, like, once you're facing the other great teams, like the Ravens, like you probably will in the playoffs, like, again, that margin for error, as John talked about earlier, like, that's going to be less. It's going to shrink. And there's going to be, maybe it's not even the whole game. There could be more stretches within a game. And maybe there's just a situation where, hey, football's weird. You go down kind of early. And special teams plays, whatever, something where, like you're running.
I brought that up. What if you get a block punt and then you're down 2 scores? Can they come back from that? I think that's the key. And you know what? It's not like you want to practice that. Oh, yeah, let's get down by 2 touchdowns. But there's a comfort level if you've seen it. On the other hand, I'll say, if you don't need to see it, why would you want to see it?
Right.
So it's kind of, but I think you're always going to have that uncertainty unless you see it, right?
Yeah, I think just it's like a game script thing. It's just not always going to go in your favor. There's going to be a situation probably where it doesn't. It doesn't mean you have to abandon the run, especially when it's your identity and how good you've been at it. But you just have to have that other element. And like, look, we're talking. We can sit here and talk about it. Lane Johnson said it after the game on Sunday. He talked about how like he knows teams are gonna eventually at some point.
Yeah, he's been
say,
talking that for a couple weeks now. He's been
exactly.
talking about
So
that.
it's not even just like we're talking. This is an internal talking point as well.
Yeah, and yeah, Lane's typically very smart. He's ahead of the game, and he's been talking about that for a few weeks. So. But hey, it hasn't come to fruition yet. I think if this is the week, I think this is arguably the two most talented teams in football, just from a standpoint of certainly amongst the starters, at least. You could argue depth and certain things, but these are two very gifted teams, so it should be a lot of fun. From a larger perspective, AFC losses, if you're going to have a loss, you want it in the AFC. But, I mean, this is all about number one seed. I mean, the Eagles are going to make the playoffs. They're going to win the NFC East. This is all about the number one seed. So they need it from that perspective. If they do lose, how do you think it's taken? Is it, I mean, it's Philadelphia, so it's always going to be over the top. But do you think it's catastrophic, or do you think, we can beat Detroit in Detroit?
Yeah, I mean, I think, if anything, it matters how that would happen if they get blown out. That's going to be a big problem. But I think, like...
Well, let's say 24-21.
Okay.
You lose, Justin Tucker turns back into Justin Tucker for a week. And it's a really close game, but you lose.
Yeah, I think, then it's not, like, obviously great. But I think looking at how things would go here down the stretch, it's tough to assume the Lions are going to lose some games. They do have some tougher ones coming up, like you guys mentioned. So every game matters. But, I mean, like, if you can't afford to lose a game down the stretch, this would probably be the game, which is kind of, like, funny because on one hand, there's so much juice for this game in terms of, like, measuring stick and wanting to see the Eagles, how they perform against the best quarterback and the best team they faced this year. Like, on the other hand, like you said, out of conference, they can kind of afford this loss more than they could with other ones. And if they win out from here, then they could still get the one seed. Pretty good chance. That's on the table. So it should be, the reaction should be that the sky isn't falling with just one loss. But certainly, it's always different to, like, say that ahead of time and then feel it afterwards.
Yeah, like I said to John earlier, we beat the Chiefs, the Bills, the Cowboys, the Dolphins. We beat all those teams last year. It didn't mean anything. I want that one seed because I want to bring Detroit out of Ford Field late in January. But I look at Detroit's schedule. They got the Bears twice, the Packers, the Bills, the Vikings, and the 49ers. So they got some tests. I mean, they're going to have a tough schedule. I don't know how
they
many
do, but I would add
lose,
with the Packers and Vikings in the division, they already beat both of those teams on the road. So those teams would have to go into Ford Field.
Yeah, I mean, look, they're going to be the favorite in presumably all of those games, but will they win them all is a bigger question. I don't know if they will. So let's just assume they lose one more. That means Eagles got to win out.
And by the way, there's a cumulative effect when you play good team right after each other. Like that tends to wear on even the best teams.
Yeah, people say that about when you play the Lions. It's the Dan Campbell effect.
Oh yeah,
next game. Yeah,
people usually get their ass kicked after playing the Lions.
Exactly.
Yeah, because they're so physical. But so it is going to be interesting. All right, I've gotten in trouble. So as I like to typically do, BLG, I want to take some of my hate and put it onto you, or maybe not, depending on what you answer. Because I have not wavered. I consistently say the best player, the best pure football player on the Philadelphia Eagles remains A.J. Brown. Now everybody's on the Saquon Barkley bandwagon. Best player in the world. Forget about A.J. Brown, best player on the Eagles. I don't want to ask you that. Best player in the world, Lamar Jackson or Saquon Barkley?
I'm a big Lamar skeptic as it relates to the postseason because his numbers there have been terrible. It's not just like kind of.
Well, I don't know what Saquon's numbers are in the postseason, but I know he hasn't been there much.
Certainly,
yeah.
So that's tough for me. I mean, Lamar is the superior regular season player. Lamar,
All right, get the hate to BLG. That's all I needed.
yeah,
Thank you, friend.
unquestionably awesome in the regular season. But again, those postseason,
I
I don't think people
appreciate
talk enough about how bad those postseason numbers are.
Yeah,
Bad.
no doubt about it. I mean, he's got to perform in the postseason. I agree with you, but he is the best player in the world. He is. I firmly believe that. But until he does it in the postseason, yeah, nobody's gonna believe that. But at least I take some of the heat off myself, so I appreciate it as I do each and every week. Because BLG's honest. I know he's going to give me an honest answer. It's not going to gin it up for the fan base, which I like.
What about the Eagles, BLJ? Is Saquon Barkley the best player, best raw football player on the Eagles right now? Johnny Mack has AJ Brown.
AJ's great, and I think it's part of it's like he's been here for a couple seasons now, so you kind of the feel of it is different, or like already know AJ Brown is awesome. You've already experienced that feeling.
Yeah, consistency plays into it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
and the way I phrase it about AJ is just kind of like boringly excellent. Like another game where like this game he had 7 targets, he catches 6 of them for 109 yards. And a touchdown. 5 of the receptions were first downs. The other one was a touchdown. I mentioned earlier, 48 of his yards were from yards after the catch. It's just like, oh yeah, AJ Brown, he's awesome. We already know that. Whereas the feel of it with Saquon, being new this year, it just feels so much more intense. And then again, obviously having the kind of season he is in the context of like he might break the single season rushing record. And he's
coming off a 255-yard game.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, here's how I described it, BLG. I said on this day and right now, because I continue to think, on November 27th, Saquon Barkley's the MVP of the NFL, but I still think the best pure football player on the Eagles is AJ Brown. I don't know why that's hard. Sometimes people have spiked seasons. MVPs are about statistics. I just go back to Tim Smith for those. I'm an old guy. Tim Smith once had a 200-yard rushing game in the Super Bowl. I think he had 600 total yards in his career. People have big games. To me, greatness is week after week after week after week after week. And Saquon's a great player. I'm not saying he's not, but and by the way, you could say Jordan Mailata is the best player on the Eagles. You could say Lane Johnson. They got a boatload of players you can make arguments for. To me, it's AJ Brown. I don't think that's a crazy statement.
No, I think you're kind of, it's getting to the territory of splitting hairs. And I think you're talking about just how good AJ and Saquon are. And I think, if you take like kind of more the totality of AJ's career, the bigger sample size, certainly. But yeah, right now, obviously Saquon it's just he's unstoppable. Like basically, I don't know how teams are going to stop him.
The reason I'm going Saquon this year is because you're seeing things like what was the stat with this week? 9th in NFL history of this game. You're seeing him leap over people backwards. Like you're seeing they might make an NFL films on this season from Saquon Barkley. I love AJ Brown, and you could maybe make an argument to take him over any receiver in the NFL. But I've seen somebody put up 1,500 yards at the receiver position. I've seen that many of times. And I think Saquon, with what he's done this year, how special it's been, I'm taking Saquon right now. I think he's the best player on the Eagles and maybe the best non-quarterback in the NFL.
I think AJ's season is getting underrated from a standpoint. You look at the receiving leaders, and
his average per catch is insane.
And like he missed some time. That's part of it. Part of it is they run the ball so much. He's not getting the same kind of targets these other top receivers are. It's kind of back to how it was like when he was in Tennessee with Derrick Henry, where he was incredibly efficient. It's just he didn't have the same level of volume based on the way the team plays. So I do think he's having like an underrated season, even though that might sound crazy because it's AJ Brown. I don't think anyone thinks he's not as good as he is.
But I think people get caught up in statistics, which they're phenomenal, but we've seen it before. We've seen 2,000-yard rushers. We've seen, not in Philadelphia, but it's happened in the NFL. That's the 9th best run. There's 8 better. It's just happened before. It's happened. I got to cover 296. That's Adrian Peterson, number 1 of all time. I was covering that game. It's happened before. So it's very hard to do stuff. But when people talk about best player in the world, that's why I get bogged. Like Myles Garrett exists. He's on a shitty team. Like, he might be the best player in the world. That is where I think the hyperbole gets too far for me. And maybe it shouldn't, because I get why people do it, because he's having a historic season. And right now, BLG, he should be the MVP. I don't think he's going to win it, because that award has become, let's be honest, it's become best quarterback award. I do think he'll win Offensive Player of the Year. And I think he's a heavy favorite for that. But boy, if Lamar Jackson has a big game, Saquon's MVP hopes are dashed this weekend. That's how difficult it is for a running back to overcome the best quarterbacks. Josh Allen in the conversation as well, and maybe even Jared Goff, depending how the Lions finish. But that's the MVP picture. I guess I'll end it with you, and make sure you follow Brandon on X at Brandon Gouton. Read him at Bleeding Green Nation. Does a tremendous job. Enjoyed your Josh Sweat piece this morning. Prediction: Eagles, Ravens.
Yeah, it's tough. I want to see the injury report for both sides.
Yeah, got to see if Roquan's playing. Yeah,
exactly. So I'm not like I'm not locked into my pick the way usually it kind of is.
Yeah, it's early. You can change it.
But I think I'm leaning Ravens. But I think it's going to be close. I think we're talking about like a field goal, maybe an overtime kind of game here. I think it's
two struggling kickers in theory too.
That's right.
Might have been the two best kickers, and for some reason having a little bit of down years. That'd be interesting. A little weather too. It's going to be cold, so that might affect the game as well, especially the kicking game.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, BLG, good stuff, man. Happy Thanksgiving to you. We're thankful you joined the show today and every Wednesday. We appreciate it, brother. Enjoy your Thanksgiving, and we'll catch up with you next week. All right, man.
Thanks, guys. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks, bud.
Up there from BLG.
BLG taking some hate off me, like he usually, because he
usually does that. Yeah, John. Yeah. He usually does that. Good stuff. All right, we got a couple super chats we'll hit before we wrap up this Wednesday edition of the show. I want to remind everybody, we got a big crowd in here, by the way. We got to get those likes up. When we have 550, 600 people in here, we should have more than 100 likes. Do you guys hate us that bad?
Unless you validate, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, there's a portion of those people, but there's also people who understand that John, you could talk football with anybody. You're going to have disagreements with them. That's part of talking football. It's part of talking sports. You're never going to agree with someone on everything. And I think there's many people who understand that. People are asking about the jersey. It hasn't been claimed yet. I mean, I hate to do it to him,
8 minutes.
He's got 6 minutes now. 6.5 minutes. Nello, you're out of here. We're doing another giveaway.
Nello's going to take a called strike 3. That's
I'll do so. If Nello checks in at some point, I'll give him like 72 hours. If he checks in, I'll do something for him. But I got it. Look, if he doesn't claim the jersey, I'm doing a redrawing today. But maybe I'll send him like a shirt or a sweatshirt or something. Who knows if I can do something for Nello. But yes, he has not claimed. I think we had a super chat we'll get to. We got a couple super chats. Thank you guys for the support today. We appreciate that. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you guys. James Carver says, J-Mac, the one issue I have with Jalen critiques and overlooking the completion percentages is it's somewhat judging by expectations, because Jalen can only do what plays are called, and they're riding Saquon until stop because it's a safer percentage. It's fair.
Well, I mean, completion percentage, guys with large completions, but I mean, they're making easier throws. That's part of it. I mean, if you go back to the 70s, you'd have completion for Terry Bradshaw's completion percentage is, in the 50s, because he's always throwing the football down the field. Now you throw 17 bubble screens. Like, I was watching a Baldy breakdown of Caleb Williams. They threw 8 tunnel screens, and he's raving about the kid. I'm like, all right. You can throw a tunnel screen.
I love the J-Mac context that we get on the show. I love when J-Mac.
I mean, it's not a difficult pass to complete. Now, he also had some tremendous throws down the field. Those were legitimate big time throws, and you could see the arm talent. But yeah, when people get hyper focused on completion percentage, it's about how if you're over 70%, all that means is you're throwing a lot of short stuff. And that goes from Joe Montana, Tom Brady on down. You're throwing a lot of short stuff. And the old days of Darryl LaMonica, big shots down the field, you're not going to complete as many of that. So that's a statistic, you could throw in the trash as far as I'm concerned. I don't care about, unless it's dramatic. If somebody's 55 in this era of football, they're terrible. If somebody's 75, hey, that guy's accurate. So if you have the extremes, but in this era of football, if you're not 65 or above, you got issues. You got issues in the NFL.
Fair. That's fair. Good stuff, James. Thank you for the super chat, brother. Brian Pumper says if Barkley won the MVP, J Mac might spontaneously combust.
Nicest guy in the world. I'd congratulate him and say, unbelievable job. Unbelievable job in this era, even more so. That's my whole point. Like, I don't care if Saquon Barkley wins the MVP. Good luck for him. Good. I'll be the first one to congratulate him. I'm saying, and by the way, it would be even a better MVP because, again, it has become what you have to overcome as a running back or a receiver to win the MVP is astronomical.
Yeah, you know what it reminds me of real quick, John? You said it, and it relates to how do you say the margin of error in when you play football is lower with the running game. It's the same thing for the MVP award, right? Lamar Jackson threw for 180 last week or whatever it was. That didn't knock him out of the race.
No.
But if Saquon has 180-yard game, he's probably gone. He's probably
if he has an 80-yard rushing game and the Ravens win like 34-17 and Lamar throws for 3 touchdowns, runs for another, he's done. That's my whole point.
Yeah, margin of error is not big. But hey, listen, I'm enjoying what I'm seeing from Saquon Barkley, and I'm not going to let anything take away from that. I do think it's a special season, though, John. I really do. It's a special season.
I don't care if Lamar Jackson wins the MVP or Josh Allen or Jared Goff or Saquon Barkley. I will congratulate any of them. But it'll be more of an accomplishment for Saquon Barkley. That's my only point.
Yeah, Kyron checks in. Kyron, appreciate it, brother. Thank you for being here. Kyron says the amount of Saquon running scares me. God forbid. I think he's talking about, the tread on the tires with Saquon. John, how do you feel about that?
It worries me more about next year than this year, to be honest.
Right.
I mean, like I always say, injuries you can't legislate injuries. So it's not like if you run them 20 times versus 25, you're going to, But that cumulative effect tends to show up on running backs, down the road the next year. That I'm a little bit concerned with. But you're trying to win the Super Bowl, and they're trying to win games. And Nick says it all the week. They manage all the time. They manage Saquon Barkley during the week, so he doesn't do a lot in practice.
Good. Don't make him. He's doing enough in the games.
And then, so that's all you can do. And the Eagles have the right beat on that. That's how you manage people during the week. You don't manage people during the game. You got to do what you got to do to win the game. Now, luckily, it should be worse, but they've been ahead so far, so many games in the fourth quarter. A number of games they've been able to take them out. And manage things a little bit that way. So, but this week they're going to need them probably the entire game.
Yep, good stuff there. Seth checks in. Seth Shifley says, if the Eagles are super desperate for an edge rusher, let's sign a box boy. Maybe he turns into Kurt Warner. JK. Yeah, no, they are desperate. I mean, and they're throwing.
Well, they got 5 bodies already they've looked at. So they're doing everything. The more darts.
John, if you had to pick one of them to contribute to the team, which one you picking? Teron, O'Shawn Mathis.
Well, I don't know. Other than I've talked to O'Shawn, nice guy, but I haven't seen him play a snap. So KJ Henry. I know nothing about those players. Charles has played a little bit. Tehran knows the system. I would say Tehran because he knows the system and he's been here. They have somewhat of a comfort level. This is the under, and I'll bring it up at a relevant point if it continues to go in a negative direction. But I think Howie made a mistake with the back end of this roster pretty consistently, trying to protect people who never play.
Yeah, and like now I said yesterday, Patrick Johnson, boy,
That's what I'm
nice to have
saying.
him.
That's where I was going. Patrick Johnson would be, I'm not saying would be great, but the Eagles wouldn't be doing this if they had Patrick Johnson.
Yeah. That was
and also Jack Stoll, who they lost to Miami.
We talked about the Patrick Johnson move. Like, what will they do? That's one of those ones you had to manage with the 53, and it turned out that I don't know what the fuck Howie is so infatuated with these stupid tight ends that don't ever get on the field.
Well, the offensive linemen, I mean, they don't dress 3 offensive linemen every week. It's like they're not helping you. Like the Darian nice. I hate to advocate cutting people. I don't like cutting people. Nick Gates is one of my favorite people on this team. Just as a guy. But he doesn't play. Like Trevor Keegan doesn't play.
Yeah. And Patrick Johnson's now stuck in New York with the shitty Giants.
Yeah. He was one of your best special teams player. He's a good backup edge rusher. Not that you want to play him, but he contributed to your team. Jack Stoll contributed to your team. A team that is a Super Bowl contender versus guys who don't play. I don't get that part of it from Howie.
Yeah, no doubt.
Obviously, he's thinking long term. But is it in the case of Gates specifically, who again is one of my favorite people on this team? There's no upside. He's been around for a long time. Everybody knows what he is. Yeah, you could argue upside with Keegan, but is somebody, and you probably, if you put Trevor Keegan on waivers tomorrow, somebody's like Carolina is going to pick him up because they're terrible and he's a rookie in his rookie contract. All right. It's cost of doing business. People lose players all the time. Minnesota had an issue with, they lost their kicker and their long snapper in the same game, which is a bad situation. And they signed Jake McQuaid, who's been a long snapper, very good long snapper. He's like 36 years old. They had to sign him. They put him on the practice squad. They went as far as they could go with the practice squad elevations. They had to put him on the regular roster, the 53-man roster, and they had to cut a young cornerback in Carolina, picked him up on waivers. Cost of doing business. You need a freaking long snapper. And the young cornerback, Caleb Evans, he stinks anyway. It's like,
every move matters, man. Every little move, especially when you get late in the years. It's interesting how it plays out. All right, John, I got to let you run. I got one more super chat. James Carver. James, you might open a can of worms in the last minutes of the show here. J-Mac, were both of us wrong compared to Zander's prediction that Saquon having as much of an impact as CMC, given what's happened now? I didn't think he would do this well. Happy Thanksgiving all. James, happy Thanksgiving to you, brother.
Well, I don't think anybody saw this coming from well, the people that did are unrealistic. I mean, again, I predicted 16 to 7. He's right at where I predicted 16. He's at like
he's already at it though through 11 games.
1650 through 11
games.
Get
to 2K.
But I always remember for all these haters out there, everybody went lower than me. Everybody except Ed Krause went higher. Everybody else I asked went lower than me. So I expected a lot out of Saquon Barkley, just not historic levels that you're seeing right now. As much of an impact as what was the question as Christian McCaffrey in the short term? Yes, he's had a greater impact. He's the offense, which I did not think we'd be talking about.
Right.
I just talked about the inefficiency of the passing game. San Francisco was more well-rounded. So depends what you want. I would prefer more well-rounded. I would prefer maybe a little bit less to Saquon and a little bit more to the passing game. I think that would be better. But Saquon Barkley's been phenomenal. I don't know how many times I can say that and people turn it off because they add context to it.
John, it's the way you said it, man. I'm telling you. Sometimes it's the way you say things and that doesn't apply to you. That applies to anybody in the media.
I've said for every consecutive day, right now he's the MVP of the NFL. I know. And then I point out it's a quarterback award and he's probably not going to win it. And they want to jump down my throat. All right, go bet on him. I'm playing the odds. It's fucking quarterback award.
Happy and safe Thanksgiving, everybody. Philly Don, thank you, brother. John, happy Thanksgiving to you, sir.
Yes,
great show today.
Everybody.
You heading down to NovaCare now?
Yes, I am.
All right, man. Thank you so much for doing it. A little overtime today. We appreciate it, brother. Travel safely, and maybe we'll catch up with you tomorrow if possible. If not, all good. Happy Thanksgiving. Thank you, brother.
All right, everybody, enjoy the holiday. See you Friday, definitely.
Right. Yep, Friday morning. All right, brother. See ya.
See ya.
All right, good stuff from Johnny Mack.